Well, welcome back to Civically Minded, where I give you practical theology for everyday life. As always, I'm your host, Corey Wing. Well, my guest today is an actual South Carolina born and bred native, and that's like seeing a homegrown charlatan here where we live. If you've, how do I say this for those that aren't from our area? You've heard they exist, but honestly, most people assume that they're like the stuff of myth and legend. It's just. I actually read to put this into perspective. I was in real estate for 20 years. My family's a real estate background. My wife's still in real estate. I just read an article this morning that said that Charlotte in the last 20 years, so from about 2005 till now, has grown 93%. It's more than any other major metropolitan area in North America. So yeah, and most of them, of course, have been coming from other places. So to find a native charlatan, or in my friend Cody's part of the world, a native South Carolinian, it actually is kind of hard. We've grown so much.
It's tremendously difficult.
It's weird. Yeah, it's weird to find us. So he's also the husband of his lovely and talented wife, Kristen, who, as I said offline, my wife has immediately become fast friends with, though his wife doesn't know it yet, because they're both named Kristen and they both spell it the quote right way, which is with an I-N at the end instead of an E-N. And so, I have it on good source that his wife is automatically cool because my wife says so.
For life.
That's right. That's right. He's a deacon at Resurrection Church in Greer, South Carolina, and he owns the Westminster Effects guitar pedal company, and we'll get into that during the episode, as well as hosting the Westminster Effects Doxology podcast, which is really, honestly, probably one of my more favorite podcasts that's out there. He just really great way of making his guest, when he has guests on, interesting. Not to say some of them aren't in their own way, but I mean, you having been on your
show, interesting.
That's having been on your show. You ask good questions. Your follow-up stuff's really good, and there is a talent to doing this. I mean, that not everyone that does this is really good at it, and interviewing is not. It's a skill, and you do such a good job.
Thank you.
And I've really enjoyed so much of what I've watched on your channel. And he is also, as if there could be more, he's also the front man for the band Igniting the Sky, who I've also got to see in concert, not that long ago. And they're incredible. My daughter often asks for me to turn on that one song. So from your most recent project, she likes you guys' music. So my 9 soon to be 10-year-old rocks out to you guys fairly frequently.
That's awesome. That's fantastic.
So I say all that to say I am honored to welcome to Civically Minded my friend Cody Fields.
Yeah, Corey, thanks for having me on, man. And like we talked about our wives spelling their names correctly. If I had $1 for every time I've been called by your name, I would be able to retire by now, or at least lose it all on NFTs. But that's neither here nor there.
I don't know that I've ever got Cody, but I get mine misspelled all the time. So I get mine is
with an E.
Yeah, it's always with an E. Even at my own church, where I've been on staff, for years now, and have been there as a member for 10 years, people still, will give me like a birthday card, anniversary card, and it's Corey, and I'm like, how long will I be here before you guys realize it's Cory?
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel your pain. And then our last name is Wing, and I'm I guess Southern enough that people think I say Wayne, so it's always, I'll get, stuff to Corey, Corey, Wayne. And I'm like, nope, you both names wrong.
Impressively wrong.
Yeah. So I feel your pain, brother. I don't know that it's retirement level pain, but I feel your pain. So
too true.
Well, there are so many hats that you wear, and again, we are friends offline. So there's so many things that honestly we could probably talk about and make a whole episode about, and I would thoroughly enjoy, just because I enjoy talking to you. I enjoy spending time with you.
Yeah.
But I think I want to start with something that has popped off in the last couple of days, mostly on X, and has just become this ridiculous kind of entirely manufactured controversy over the Christian hard rock band Skillet.
Yep.
who's been around since 90, so they're coming up on their 30th anniversary. They started in like 96. So I
Mhm.
mean, they've been around a long time, and one of the most successful Christian acts of all time.
Of all time, yep.
Um and just incredibly well known, incredibly successful, crossover, huge crossover success,
Yep.
WWE success, which we love because we're a WWE family. We are a Monday Night Raw every Monday night. It's like the highlight of Monday night at my house.
I have learned something new today. I didn't know that. That's
Oh
amazing.
man, and I grew up as a big wrestling fan, so I mean, it's this is for me a lifelong thing, and to now get to share it with my kids is like it's the good stuff of
That's
life, like
glorious.
when they get into Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or WWE, I'm like, I've succeeded. It's so good. I mean, do I want them to be Christians? Yes, of course, but I want them to also like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and WWE. I mean, it's I wish I were
I
kidding.
love it.
I sadly I wish I were joking. I'm kind of not. But so I mean, Skillet's a known entity, and I mean, been
Mhm.
around so long that honestly, if I'm just being brutally honest, this took me completely by surprise. I did not have it on my end of year bingo card that Skillet was going to like piss off half the Christian world by doing a cover of O Come Emmanuel."
Right. Right. And for the record, the reason we're talking about this is because I build Seth Morrison, their lead guitarist's signature pedals. I actually have one right here, the 2716, based on Revelation 1:6. It's meant to capture his live tone in a box, and so I've known Seth for goodness 5 years now, I think it was, and we started developing the original version of that in 2021, released it I think in 22 or 23. I'd have to go look. But it was a year of development, and that's been a lot of fun. And so uh, yeah, if like I was telling you before, if they're within 2 hours of me at this point, I'm gonna go hang out. and like you've noted, like they're a mainstay in the Christian world, crossover appeal, but also they're one of the few acts that both has solid theology and they haven't deconstructed or apostatized all the way through. And so their faithfulness has been a huge testament, huge witness in the body of Christ, and super thankful for those guys.
Well, it's I mean, again, for some of you that may not listen to that kind of music, you don't know who this is. One, I would tell you go look them up. Um, I could tell you what like some of my favorite albums are, but I'm old. So honestly, as good as Awake and Comatose and some of those albums and huge success of those albums,
Yeah,
and I love those albums. I have a soft spot for their original Forefront record, from 96,
yeah,
which is
yeah.
just called Skillet. I mean, it's the first song on that album is called I Can, and I still listen to that song frequently because I mean, again, not just musically, it's great. Theologically, what John is singing and saying in that song has touched me since like the first time I ever heard it. It's a very honest and vulnerable song about a guy that says, can I really go to God with everything? Like
Right,
fears
right.
and disappointments and I was raised in a very fundamental Baptist world, and no one ever really said you couldn't go to God with that stuff, but it was kind of insinuated, that you don't bother God with you certainly don't complain to God, and then when I
Right.
kind of grew up and started reading the Bible more for myself and going, David seemed to quite often, and Job certainly does, and Jonah does.
Mhm.
Actually, it happens all the time,
All the time.
by like people we say are the heroes of the faith. And yes, sometimes they are reprimanded because they cross a line, right? I mean, so
Right.
so Job is told, "Hey, pull on your big boy pants. We're going to have a conversation, you and I need you to be quiet and listen." Um, but I mean, David's called a man after God's own heart, and the Psalms are chock full of examples of him going to God and saying, "I don't like what's happening. I'm not thrilled with what's going on in my life. I want you to help me, or I want you to, take care of our enemies." Or I mean, so no, it's that the vulnerability of that song in particular. off their first album. Just it was it's been a mainstay in my life. So no, Skillet's been amazing. And so what's been going on has been a shock to me. So explain for the audience kind of what they've done that has been so egregious, so offensive that Christians on every side of the aisle, from like the independent fundamental Baptist, who I expect to be upset about Skillet, to like the theology bros that are on the rights, the super MAGA right side of things. How have they just angered everybody?
Yeah. So last Friday, Skillet put out a rendition of O Come Emmanuel," and like I've a little inside baseball. When you're friends with someone in the band, I actually got a taste of this last month, so I knew this was coming. I knew the song was coming. Is what I'm saying. I'm not saying I saw the reaction coming, and I told him, like, listen, man, I don't do this very often, but when that breakdown hit, not only did I stank face, ooh, like it was that good of a breakdown when it hit,
Mhm.
but I also chuckled. Right? I got both reactions of, man, this is heavy and it's fun. And the funny thing is, like, for the first 3 minutes of the song, 2.5, 3 minutes of the song of this rendition, it's pretty straightforward, traditional, piano driven, beautiful. And then, it gets the metal treatment with
Mhm.
8-string guitars. It's the first time they've ever gone that low. And for some reason, the guys on as you said, the super MAGA crowd, who live to only complain about things, decided to chime in that either this was demonic, it wasn't doing the song any favors, or it was part of part of white ghetto culture. Was one thing that I interacted with, and it's honestly been what I told Seth yesterday is this is a musical version of the Streisand effect. Is the more people complained about it, the more they rose in the charts. They just kept getting more listens, and people just kept realizing, "Oh yeah, this is actually really good." And yeah, it does glorify God regardless of what you think about the genre.
Well, and that ultra right side crowd, and again, I run a channel called Civically Minded, and my explicit political, you know, stuff that I do on this channel, I label under a kind of sub brand called the right wing, for goodness sakes.
Right.
I'm pretty right leaning,
Yeah,
I
me too.
mean, um, but these guys, God love them. The hyper patriarchal,
God
you
love them
know,
because you sure can't.
Yeah, because I'm finding it increasingly difficult to do so. That's right. That just hyper patriarchal. Women should be barefoot and pregnant, and
Right.
just and I'm
And that's not to dog on patriarchy in general,
no,
right?
not at all. I am my. You just met my wife on camera,
Yeah. Yeah.
and she seems happy, and I mean, and we have a patriarchal home, and she just left for work, so
Right.
she has a
Right.
job and
Right.
she contributes, and she is involved at church, and if she's not a deaconess or a shepherdess or any of the other stuff that the PCA seems to be having a problem with recently, but she's just a normal Christian woman that's a good wife and a good mother, right?
Yep.
I mean, that then and I don't know, for most of human history, that seemed okay. But man, some of these guys are just I don't know where they're coming from. And most of them are young, so I hold out hope that most of them are just young. And when they get a
Yeah.
little older, they'll dislodge their heads from their rear ends.
Right.
Um,
There's absolutely room for disagreement, like talking to Seth, or I know John has had a couple of interviews, and I'm hoping to record with him soon. We've got that I don't remember what cliche I'm trying to remember, but trying to make that happen. I've recorded with him before. But they don't care, like, they're okay if you don't like it. Like,
right.
if you don't care for, hard rock, or in this case, I mean, this gets into straight up modern metal,
Mhm.
but they're okay if you don't like it. And honestly, they don't hold it against you if you think it's wrong for them to do so. Like that's been the great thing in their reaction is they're willing to engage with you. Like Seth has had some back and forth with renowned YouTuber Spencer Smith of the IFB persuasion, and reminded him that I wrote a blog responding to some of his erroneous claims of what John Cooper said regarding Ozzy Osbourne because he took them maliciously and slanderously out of context. And when I, of course, as Spencer Smith is wont to do, when I wrote about that, it's basically an open letter, and he blocked me on X for it. And so Seth has had some back and forth with him, but he's been firm, but he has been gracious. It's like, look, if you don't like the music, that's fine. Don't listen to it. I don't care. But what you need to do is represent us fairly. And I think that's an entirely reasonable ask.
And more than reasonable, everyone in this argument is claims to be Christians, right? So
Right.
beyond reasonable, it's the Christian thing that we are supposed to do. Um,
Yeah.
it's really telling. Our head pastor preached has been preaching out of First Peter, and he just entered First Peter 4 this past Sunday. And there's this list of just these egregious sins, 3 or 4 of them, and then at the end of the list is being a busybody.
Mm.
And
Mm.
and you kind of go, wait, what? Wait, busybody is in with some of these other like really crazy sins? Wait a second. Um, and so it's really been on my mind a lot since Sunday, and not because I think I don't I have my own sin issues. Please, my audience, please, I have my own sin issues, and I'm pretty honest about them. Busybody's not normally one of them, though. But that it's listed right there. So and if you don't know how this works in the Christian world, let me give you the run, the in round game that they do. They don't call it being a busybody. They call it being discerning. Their
Right.
entire discernment ministries, that need to just warn you about stuff that's going on out there.
Right.
And is there a place for that? Of course there is.
Yeah.
Obviously there is. Um, I've done some of it here on this channel,
Me too. Yep.
but they do it with they're the gatekeepers of every issue, of every person. These are just they're constantly gatekeeping everything, and they're just giving a Christianized, whitewashed excuse for being a busybody. Um,
Yep. Yeah, like
so
I have tremendously benefited from guys like Chris Roseborough, for example, and his exposing of the New Apostolic Reformation influence in modern worship music, stuff like that. But what guys are doing here is making things up out of whole cloth,
yeah,
right? Where is Jesus Lord over everything? The answer is yes. The correct answer is yes, full stop. Which then means he is Lord over how the key of A works, for example. He is Lord over how vocal fry works or false chords work. He's also Lord over how diodes interact with a guitar signal and then create what we call overdrive or distortion. And so he's Lord over all of those things. So can they be harnessed rightly and wrongly? And the answer is yes. And as John Cooper has said, is Satan doesn't actually create anything. So Satan didn't create any musical genres. Ultimately, we can thank Jesus for heavier forms of music, regardless of your persuasion of or taste rather. You don't have to like it. That's fine. But to make things up and say Satan created these genres, it's it's not just ignorant, it's stupid. and it's and
yeah.
it's dishonest when you really get down to it.
Well, and you have to start really straining gnats to what exactly is it you don't like? Drop D tuning? Is that what you're not a fan of? Again,
Right.
you mentioned vocal fry. for my audience that may not know what that is, that's you know, it is well, it is well. That's clean singing.
Uh-huh.
It is well. You know, so
Yeah.
anytime you distort your own voice, and you add what again you do in the guitar pedal world with a
Mhm.
box, our vocal cords and our vocal folds and things are able to do if you teach them how to do it.
Yep.
Um, you know, that's called vocal fry. Again, you sing in a band that is exceedingly heavy,
Yeah.
and you do a lot of different vocal techniques,
Right,
you
and
know.
there's a way like, a lot of people think that all they're doing is yelling, right? But, the funny thing is you actually don't think about speaking when you're engaging in, like, a metal scream. There's there are techniques that make it actually I could actually do my false chord lower growls longer than I can clean singing because I'm technically out of my natural range in my band. and
Yeah.
so and so there are healthy non-destructive ways to do these things, like have people blown out their vocal cords, yes, but also my pastor had a vocal cord injury 7 or 8 years ago, where he had basically abused his voice both preaching and leading worship, for years and years and years, and doing it, just not out of neglect. He just had bad technique and he
Mhm.
developed a nodule, right? And so you can do that with regular old worship music.
That's right.
And so there are proper warm up and actual screaming techniques to where there's literally no harm done because you're just utilizing the body as God made it.
That's exactly right. I mean, Steve Perry, famously, you know, who was probably the most famous lead singer of Journey, and had one of the most just hypnotically amazing voices of the late 70s and into the 80s. Um, Everyone would have thought that he knew what he was doing. But I mean, he destroyed his voice,
Right.
absolutely destroyed it, you know,
Right.
and just from bad technique, you
Yeah,
know, and
and a modern example, mainstream examples, Miley Cyrus. If you've heard her recently, she sounds like a Waffle House waitress because she
yeah,
abused her vocal cords, and now her newer music, which obviously I don't recommend for any reason, but her vocal register is significantly lower than before because that's all she can do now.
well, and even her speaking voice has become very gravelly and just kind of,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, and it's
Yeah.
just bad technique.
Yep.
You've done damage to all the stuff that's in here, you know,
Yep.
and
It's
as a
just
guy whose main instrument is here,
Is
I
here, yeah.
understand.
Yeah, it's just like anything else. Like me being a big baseball fan, if you throw wrong, you're going to mess up your shoulder. I actually had
Yep.
to retrain myself recently, just like step through things because like playing church league softball, I was noticing a lot of shoulder pain with throwing. And it's like, oh yeah, I noticed I'm flying open too early and it's putting too much strain on my rotator cuff. Maybe I should stop that. And as soon as I stopped that and stayed tight and all that kind of stuff, it stopped hurting. Same
Yep.
thing with vocal cords. It's
Yeah.
it's like God has designed our bodies to do these things on purpose. Because otherwise, you have to get into saying that things like Mongolian throat singing is inherently sinful, and I don't think anybody's really ready to go there.
Well, because yeah, that's the thing I'm saying about straining gnats is what exactly about things don't you like? You know,
Yeah.
if it's just again a personal preference, and I've said this recently on another podcast where I was a guest actually, and one here on my own channel where I had teaching elder James Baird, and we were talking about his new book King of Kings, and through that we got talking about the old doctrine, and I say old doctrine because sadly here in the West we've let it become a doctrine that we've let fall away, and we need to recover it. The old doctrine of personal conscience.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah.
the reformers were big on personal conscience. They
Yep.
understood it very clearly.
Yep.
Of course, Luther being one of the most famous examples, where it's unless I am convinced by Scripture and conscience, here I stand, I can do no other. Right.
Yep.
So I mean, personal conscience is it's a really biblical concept that we need to recapture, because if not, then we get what we're talking about, this perpetual Christian grievance culture that, I mean, it's just relentless at times, and almost all the time is exhausting. I mean,
Exactly.
it's
Exactly.
not helpful.
And Paul in Romans 14, like that's the big Christian liberty passage where he notes, well, basically, if you don't like these things, if your conscience offends you by partaking in drinking wine or eating meat, it's because you're weak. And there's R.C. Sproul would talk about the tyranny of the weaker brother. That's at least where I heard it from. I don't know if that was original to him or not, that phrase, but that's where I heard it. And that's so true in this case. Is
Mhm.
these guys who don't like this particular thing, what they should be doing, the scriptural standard is to say, I don't like it.
Yeah.
Cool. That is the scriptural standard. By the scriptural standard, you're not allowed to judge someone for partaking or not partaking, and that applies. The specific application he gives, if I recall correctly, is celebrating holidays. One man esteems one day as better than another, and so like in the Reformed world, some people catch strays for celebrating Christmas from the overly regulative principle types. And I would say, hey, read Romans 14 and just obey it. Stop
Well, and
taking
again,
pot
I'll
shots.
say this as a PCA guy, and for my PCA viewers, some of whom are ruling and teaching elders, I'll get texts and phone calls. They even say Sabbath in that. I mean,
Yeah.
Paul even mentions Sabbath.
Yeah.
Now, do I have a very particular view of Sabbath as a PCA guy? Are we regulative principle guys? We are, and I make no
Yep.
bones about that. I think we're right,
Yep.
but that's where I have to leave it is I think we're right.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I'm a regulative principle guy. I just think there's gradations of that, right?
Exactly.
Where
Exactly.
like having grown up in the Church of Christ, they tried to utilize the regulative principle to force a cappella singing. And I know that there are some in the Presbyterian world who would go that route as well. And that's fine. I don't begrudge anyone that. But I don't see that as being necessary to the regulative principle, if that makes sense.
David doesn't in Psalm 150 and Psalm
That's
140.
true.
I mean, so
Yeah.
so I mean, yeah, there are I don't see how you and they would say, well, that wasn't in the temple. And again, I've heard all the arguments.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't think they're good.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
and but I mean these things are they're personal. And
Mhm.
so I'm thankful to you. I'm thankful to the band members of Skillet.
Absolutely.
I was saying offline to you, and I'm not going to go into the whole story, but I was exposed to John Cooper and that band in '96. I mean, when they
Mhm,
first came on the scene, I'm that's the year I graduated high school. I'm old enough that I was around for that.
mhm.
I was still touring with my band back in those days, so I was on the outskirts of the CCM world. Um, we never did end up signing, but we were talking in '97, I think it was. We were talking to what defunct record label that doesn't even exist anymore, hadn't in a long time, but a record label back then called 5 Minute Walk Records.
I
Um,
remember them, yeah.
Five Iron Frenzy would have been their biggest band,
Yep.
but they had other bands too. Five Iron Frenzy is still around actually. So we were talking to 5 Minute Walk Records about signing with them when it all kind of imploded for us, which again with bands is not abnormal. It happens, I mean,
I know
most
the
of them,
feeling well.
yeah, most of them break up. It's really rare that they don't. So so I've known of Skillet and even spoke to John Cooper personally. He'll never remember this, of course. But he and his bandmates back in those days, which were different guys, um, were so kind even back then,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
they've stayed consistent for 30 years. And in the CCM world,
that doesn't happen
that doesn't happen.
ever.
That never happens. I mean, it's um, even and again, I hate to name drop, but I don't. This is so important that you understand as my audience that the truth of what Cody and I are saying. So the only way to make you understand this is to drop names that you might know. Um, Jars of Clay and Amy Grant are pro LGBTQ.
Mhm. Yep.
I mean, and they're not quiet about it. They're
Right.
very openly pro LGBTQ. Um, So
Reliant K has gone that route. They were my favorite band in middle school and high school, or at least top 3. I believe Switchfoot has started going down that route. Like the list of allegedly Christian musicians going into the realm of false doctrine is very,
and
very
that's the
long.
ones that only go false doctrine. A ton more that we haven't mentioned fully apostatize.
Yeah,
So you've
guys
got
like Under Oath. Yeah,
Under Oath, Kevin Max Smith of DC Talk,
yep,
Derek Webb of Cademan's Call.
yep,
I can't remember his name, John, and I can't remember his last name of Hawk Nelson. I
yeah,
mean, they're just on and on and on. Ray Boltz, who was not even in, Christian rock music. I mean, he was like as CCM as you get, and Ray Boltz left his wife for a man, and has been practicing homosexual for
yeah,
decades now.
yeah.
I mean, Michael Tate, sadly, who thankfully I don't think is apostatized, but just had to step down from the newsboys in shame because
Right.
stuff came out about stuff he was doing years ago. Um, it's an industry rife with problems. I mean, either
Hmm.
false piety issues or again apostasy issues, or folks that totally leave anything that resembles Orthodox Christianity for something that's going to be very worldly. And
Right.
so, in that industry, Skillet and a couple of others have remained faithful for decades, and we're going to throw them under the bus for a version of a Christmas hymn that you don't like. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
seriously.
just it's remarkable to me.
Seriously. And these guys have been so welcoming to Kristen and me, where the first time I met anyone not named Seth in Skillet was 2022 Winter Jam, and met them backstage. Only met John that day, but the whole band, the crew has embraced us. Like our typical tradition when we see them is to hang out with the other Cody, their sound guy. So will hang out with in the booth with him about half the show and hear exactly what he's hearing and exactly how he's mixed it, which is always just perfection. And then we'll go side stage and see all the logistics with Nick, their guitar tech, and stuff like that. And they've all just welcomed us with open arms. They're always excited to see us, even if they're faking it really, really well. So the whole operation around Skillet is just totally classy, God honoring, etc., etc. Just fantastic people.
Yeah, and John, then I mean, I don't know that he's doing his podcast anymore, just because again he's such a busy guy. I can't imagine. I
He
never
actually
saw
just
how
put
he
out a
did it.
he actually just put out a really good episode
I'll have to watch it.
on the martyrdom in Nigeria. So it's
Ooh,
really, really good.
I will have to go watch because I
Yeah.
I really enjoyed when he was dropping those more regularly. Because again, he's got such a unique voice, and I don't mean that in the way it sounds. He's seen a lot. He's been a lot of places.
Right.
I mean, they were on Ozfest for goodness sakes. I
Yeah.
mean, so when you talk about these are guys and gals that have been faithful in the CCM world, but have also been faithful in front of like the most pagan lost secular hard rock bands that the world has to offer. I mean,
When you proclaim that Jesus Christ is Lord just a couple of acts before Behemoth gets on,
yeah.
and for those who are not in the know, I do not recommend listening to anything by Behemoth. Their entire shtick is to be it really is to be as blasphemous as possible. I did an episode on them, and just to reference song titles that they were putting out, we had to bleep things out.
Or
Like,
Tool or Perfect Circle, which
yeah,
is both
sure,
both Maynard, of course, but I mean, who again, I used to love that first Perfect Circle album, and then I grew in Christ, and I was like, I don't know that I can listen to Judith anymore. I mean,
yeah,
there were songs that I was like, it's a great song, but I don't know that I can, in good conscience.
yeah,
Again, we're talking about personal conscience.
yep,
I didn't feel right listening to some
right.
of that music. But
And I personally have a lot of room for listening to angsty, angry
yeah,
music. Like there's a difference, I think, between listening to something that's angry or
Yep.
has angst. Like those are emotions that God gave us to wrestle with the fact that we're in a fallen world. For instance, the band Lorna Shore, one of the heaviest bands on the planet, symphonic blackened deathcore. And their vocalist is so talented at what he does with his screams. There's a couple of YouTube videos of him going to an ENT and them scoping his throat to figure out what he's doing, because it's just so insane. Like he's doing fry screams with rolled R's. Like
Wow.
it's that level of talent. But they have and I can't remember the title, but it's on their new album. It's a song from his grandmother's perspective of when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Wow.
And oh my goodness, like the amount of depth and that initial despair that you can feel from that kind of diagnosis, like he really nailed it, I think. And Christians have not done a good job at leveraging all of the emotions that God has given us in our art and in our music. So much
Yep.
of our stuff is happy clappy prom date with Jesus, borderline pillow talk with Jesus sometimes, like gets really creepy in that level. And it's all major key stuff. We don't have enough minor keys, we don't have enough laments, which
Yep.
you read the Psalms, or goodness, you have an entire book of the Bible called Lamentations.
That's right.
And so it's like, well, maybe we should do a little more of that here and
Yeah.
there. It doesn't have to be everything. I'm not saying that that's the only thing that you should listen to, but there should be some category in our minds for listening to that kind of music, regardless of genre.
Well, and you such a I want to kind of hunker down there for just another minute or two, that because
Yeah.
that is such a good point. Not just musically, it's such a good point theologically.
Mm.
Um, don't sleep on Cody. We're good enough friends. I can tell you, he is a deep thinking. Uh, he is a theologically minded guy, and I've gotten to know that about him, and I've respected immensely. Um, we get judgy in the Christian world. Lord knows we do. Um, but what you just said is so important because, to your point, Lamentations, and what's funny about the Jesus, is my boyfriend music, which is so much of modern praise music, worship music. These are the same people singing those songs that, if they've read Song of Songs, it's maybe once and they realized it was kind of like uncomfortable and they've never read it again. They've probably never heard a sermon preached out of Song of Songs because, again, it's just too sexual, it's too graphic. And I'm like,
Mhm.
have you heard the songs that you guys sing in church? I mean, again, like
Seriously.
to your point, that's basically Jesus pillow talk,
Yeah.
and you're
Without
uncomfortable
the
with Song of
cigarette.
Songs. I mean, I'm like, oh my goodness, Song of Songs is almost like would be G rated compared to some of the stuff you guys, some of the stuff you
This is why we have that South Park episode from like 20 years ago where, oh man, what was it? Faith Plus One. Cartman formed the band Faith Plus One as a Christian rock band. All you have to do is just take regular songs and replace Baby with Jesus. And you have a Christian song.
I said that back in the 90s, that the only difference between R&B and Christian, what do they call mostly Christian black music? Gospel. Christian gospel music is that exactly. The difference
Mhm.
between like Silk, or some of the 90s R&B groups, and the
Boyz II
wine
Men and
and the
Seal
Winans.
and
Yeah, and the
yeah,
Winans
yeah,
is Baby is now Lord. So yeah, it's just true,
yeah.
and Cartman's not wrong. Um it so there is this spectrum. Again, I've been preaching out of Ecclesiastes. I'm still preaching out of Ecclesiastes. And if a Christian put out a book, or again, we've been talking using an album that was as brutally honest and autobiographically vulnerable as what Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, we'd be scandalized. We would try to cancel them, and we would never purchase the book, the album, whatever. But
Mhm.
Solomon, there's a point to Ecclesiastes. I
Right.
mean, he is pulling back the curtain on all of the mistakes he's made in life.
Yep.
And he's saying to his son, who sadly did not listen, and I mean, again, history tells us he didn't listen. He was a terrible
Right.
king. The kingdom splits. His son rules in Judah and is an awful, ungodly man. The scriptures tell us as much. And so his son did not listen. He didn't listen to Proverbs, and he didn't listen to his dad in Ecclesiastes either. But I mean, Ecclesiastes is written for a point,
Yeah.
so that at the end of these 12 chapters of just brutal honesty, he can say, here is the end of all things.
Yep.
Serve God and keep his commandments. That
Hmm.
fear God. That's he ends the book with what really is the point of the whole book.
Yep.
And the rest of it has been leading up to that gut punch of don't make the mistakes I made, son.
Yeah.
And we sometimes in the Christian world, or way too often, I would say in the Christian world, think that when someone does that, it's them glorifying their sin. I suppose there are times that that's happened, certainly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But just yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, one of the guys from Founders Ministry had to step down from being a pastor because he was caught in an affair, and
Hmm.
it became very public, and as those things so often do. Him repenting of that publicly because he's a public minister that's had a very public ministry doesn't mean he's celebrating the sin.
Yep.
Now, again, he could say, "Darn right, I've been having an affair," you know, and she's been
Finger.
sweet. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, yes, I mean, could that happen? I'm sure it has. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about men and women that have been broken over their own sinfulness, and to use it as a teaching lesson for other Christians. They've been vulnerable enough to air that laundry publicly and say, please learn from my mistakes.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I'm broken over what I've done. I've repented unto God. I will never be the same. Some
Yep.
of some of them have lost their families, lost their ministries. Some of them sure are restored eventually, but some are not. Some are never restored.
Yep.
And God can be very honored in that kind of brutal honesty and that kind of vulnerability. So to your point, um, there is a value in us exploring what it means to be a human being, as Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, living under the sun.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and living under the sun, what he means in that is in a sinful world. This is we live east of Eden, sin's a reality, it's broken everything. What does life look like under the sun?
Right.
And and there's something very cathartic and helpful when Christians are open and vulnerable enough to share that with one another. So
And
thank
even
you for bringing that up.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And even from I I would agree with Doug Wilson on his interpretation of Isaiah 65 of the new heavens and new earth being the new creation that Christ kickstarted at the resurrection and ascension for that matter. But Isaiah 65 talks about the young man will die at 100 years old. So even from an optimistic postmillennial perspective, we still have to deal with death
Yeah.
at the very least. You still got to deal with death. And well, how do we do that? Like
Yeah.
God has given us the gift of art, and that's something I've really picked up from Toby Sumter. Like he talks about this all the time on Cross Politic, and I was able to tell him that recording this year at Fight Laugh Feast is everything starts with gratitude. Literally everything, like Ephesians 5, thanking God always and for everything. Which how often? All the time,
Always. Yeah.
always, and for how many things?
All the
Every
things.
everything, all of the things, which you can't it's just universal. You have to give God all thanks always and for everything. And when you start there, then you're actually able to live a full joy-filled life because then you can thank him for both the happy and the hard
Yeah.
because it's Romans 8. It's all conforming you to the image of his son for your glorification and for his glorification for that matter. That's just more fun. To put it crassly, it's just more fun.
And it's healthy. So
Yeah,
so there's no downside to it.
exactly,
It's more enjoyable, but it's
exactly.
also more God honoring. I mean, again, the way we say it in the Westminster, which we'll get to your company here in a second,
We'll get there.
and your abuse of our beloved Westminster, um, other than you make incredible products, so it's not too much of an abuse. But the way we say it in the Westminster is, "What is the chief end of man?" It's the first question in the catechism.
Yep,
You know, it's to enjoy God and glorify Him forever.
yep,
You know, and there's no qualifiers placed on that by the divines, and I love that. I love that the divines, in their wisdom, didn't place qualifiers.
yep,
So, when do we enjoy God? Yes, is the answer.
yeah,
Just all the time.
period.
You
Yeah,
know, full stop. Enjoy God and
yep,
glorify Him forever.
forever.
You know,
Yep,
it's just that's it. Well, you mean in the Black Death? Yeah,
yes,
yeah. You mean when the finances and the economy and everything's a wreck? Mhm.
yes,
You mean when my sin is destroying me and I'm losing the battle? Yep.
yep,
And I mean in the good times. I mean
yep,
those two.
all of
So I mean it's just that and because it's not lessening us, though it is. It's what I learned probably most from R.C. Sproul during his years of ministry, and I never met the man. He's one that I will hug in on the other side and say, "Thank you. You don't know me.
for
You
real
never
though.
met me,
Yeah,
but boy, did you influence my life." Um, is the whole idea of the holiness of God. That
mhm,
when we cheapen God, and that's what we're doing, when we cheapen God by saying that He doesn't you know, get glory out of the sloppy parts of our life or even the sinful parts of our life. Now, that does not mean, as Paul clearly states in Romans, do I go sin so that grace may abound? By all means, no, or
right.
may it never be,
Yep,
I mean, it's the strongest language he could possibly use. In the Greek, it is literally the strongest language he could possibly use. You
yep,
know, no, don't do that, but do understand that God actually somehow is glorified even in your sin because his grace and mercy gets to cover over it.
yep,
I mean, that there is an aspect of the glory of God that we would have missed had the fall not happened.
exactly. The
That's
Felix
mind
Culpa.
boggling.
Yep,
So I mean, please, audience, don't miss the theological depths of what Cody's brought up. It's just it will enrich your life in ways that you're not prepared for yet.
mm, good times, good
S-
times.
So talking about enriching, um, let's move to the way that President Trump has enriched our country since he took office the second term. And let me put some real numbers to this. So the current U.S. debt sits somewhere around 38 trillion with a T,
Mm,
$1 trillion, which is a number so large that it's honestly hard to wrap your mind around.
yeah,
Um, I mean, it's if you feel overwhelmed by a number that big, it's because you should be.
yeah,
So we're at $38 trillion. The interest alone is more than we'll ever probably be able to pay off. We have earned this year in 2025 through I want to say this numbers through around November 1st. About 310 billion with a B, $310 billion from in revenue from the tariffs alone. Now there's obviously taxation that's coming in. There's other stuff coming in too. But just from the tariffs that he put in place when he came into office, this calendar year we've brought in about $310 billion. Now that's a drop in the bucket of the 38 trillion that we owe. You're a small business owner.
mhm.
Um, Tell me about your love affair,
Oh, man.
with tariffs. I'm not sure that you and I are going to actually see eye to eye on this,
Yeah,
and that kind of excites me. So
yeah,
so
let's throw
let's
down. I
yeah,
really enjoy, disagreeing with people just enough to make things interesting. But,
just to make people on the other side of the camera uncomfortable. Yeah.
yeah, a Reformed Baptist and a Presbyterian walk into a bar. So, uh, or as I like to call them, import taxes, right? It's not tariffs is the nicer term. What it is import taxation.
Yep.
So there are two different levels to address this from. The first is, did President Trump actually have the authority to enact these particular import taxes? According to the IEEPA, which is what he cited explicitly when he enacted all of these, the answer is no. That particular law does not give him the authority to unilaterally impose tariffs on anything. Now, there are other laws that give him the authority to impose import taxation on other particular things for other particular reasons, but what we're talking about is this particular set of tariffs. The International Trade Court already found no, this doesn't give you the authority. An appeals court said no, this doesn't give you the authority, and it sounds like the Supreme Court is at least skeptical of the of the case that the Trump administration made. Uh, does this actually give you that authority? And being a Bible guy, 1 Corinthians 4 goes, "Don't go beyond what is written."
Yeah.
Easy enough, right? So open and shut biblical case in terms of what these import taxes should be. It shouldn't be a thing legally. Now, whether you on principle are for or against is another story. And I think I can make a good biblical case, but in terms of a practical case, first, I would say, well, who in the world pays the most for sugar? That is the United States of America, actually. The United States of America has gigantic sugar tariffs, and that is one of the reasons why we have so much high fructose corn syrup in everything.
Yeah.
Is we have enormous corn subsidies for farmers, and part of that is to make up for the fact that we have such enormous sugar tariffs. And so we pay out the wazoo for sugar. Sugar is the most expensive in the United States out of anywhere in the world, and we make up for that with cheap corn syrup, which
Less
just
healthy.
is significantly less healthy, and it doesn't taste as good if we're
No,
being honest.
no.
So we're not enjoying our food as much as we should because of taxation. On top of that, what one of the things that President Trump has been dishonest about in this current tariff regime is who is paying the tariffs. One of the myths is that nations trade with each other. So China and the United States do not trade. Like those governments are not trading. It is private entities, civilians within those nations, within those states who are saying, "Hey, you have a thing that I want. Here is money for that thing." And they say, "I will give you the thing. Here you go." That's just how economies work.
Yeah, it's just capitalism. Yeah.
Exactly. And so uh, it's not those nations that pay the import taxes, and it's not the foreign entities where we are importing those things from. It is the importer who pays for
Mhm.
the import taxes one way or another. It can go through the person that's exporting to the United States, but ultimately it is the importer who has paid it. So at this point, I have paid with my small business over $4,000 in tariffs one way or another. I actually have a buddy in the guitar pedal industry who is his business is larger than mine. He does OEM manufacturing for other brands. He owns I think 3 separate guitar effects pedal brands, and he does some other stuff in terms of circuit design and whatnot for other industries as well. But he's over $150,000 at this point. And so, from a practical level, just a baseline economic level, and I can get to the biblical case later, but from a basic economic level, that is money that I now don't have. Like, I don't believe that economics is a zero sum game like the Marxists do, but taxation is. So I don't have that $4,000 to pay myself, to pay bills, to reinvest into the business, to pay, for instance, YouTube influencers to demo my pedals and say, "Hey, go buy this stuff." Like that's $4,000. That's significant for a one man show.
Mhm.
And now I don't have that money just because one guy said so.
Yeah.
So do with that what you will.
So I'll clip what I'm about to say out. middle-aged bladder. Got to use the bathroom. I'll be
Me
right back.
too, actually.
And good, good. And then I'll rebuttal that.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
I was in the same boat, so you did me a favor, actually.
Yeah, I've never had to do that. I've always been able to just kind of, wait it out. But I was like, nope, nope. So let me refocus and I'll pick that back up. So all right. So let me start by saying you're absolutely right. It's a taxation.
Yep.
Let me say I'm okay with that.
Okay.
And I'm okay with that all the way down the line, meaning I don't believe the importer or the exporter should have to um, be the one to pay that. Obviously, you've got to pay the upfront cost of that because it's
Mhm.
just the way it works. But passing that cost along to the consumer, I think is how that should be handled. And that it is a consumption tax. I'm okay with a consumption tax. I feel that consumption tax, again, whether you're talking biblically or economically, is probably the fairest form of taxation,
Sure.
um, because everyone consumes. If you want something and you want to go buy it, and now it cost, you know, 25% more than it did 6 months ago, and you're willing to pay the 25% increase in price, by golly, go buy it. So one, I think part of the problem, whether it's coming from the president, his administration, talking heads online, uninformed people that just don't know better, is they don't come out and say, hey, this is a tax. No, it's a tax,
Yeah.
and I'm okay with it. Um, so as long as we're upfront about what it is, and that it is what it is, that's where I start to think, no, just be honest. Just tell us, hey, here's, because again, we are $38 trillion in debt. There's no fun way to chip away at that.
It has to come from somewhere.
So I mean, if we have any hopes of digging out, and I don't mean of the 38 trillion, but just being more fiscally responsible so it doesn't grow from 38 trillion to 70 trillion, then there's going to be pain points along the way. I mean,
Mhm.
when you're fat and you want to get in shape, it ain't fun. it means I got to stop eating the crap I've been eating, and I got to start working out and doing
Right.
things I don't want to do. So anytime you're tightening your belt, whether it's economically, literally, it's difficult. There's pain involved in that.
Sure.
So and I'm just upfront about that. I think,
Mhm.
okay, I know what it is, and cool. History lesson for those who may not know. The US government was primarily funded by tariff from 1792 to 1913. It was the bulk of how we paid for everything for the vast majority of our history until what happened around 1914, World War One. So in 1913, modern income taxes started and they've never went away since. Now, there
Yep.
were income taxes prior to that to fund wars and other things, and then they were rescinded after the time that we needed them. And tariff became, once again, the primary way that our government funded itself. So tariffs are old, been around forever, and it is the way that we funded this country for most of its history until World War One, when income taxation became a thing, and it's been a thing ever since. So we're going to pay it regardless, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
If there's a consumption tax and they take away my income tax, hey, man, yeah, let's do that. Let's go pre 1913. So I guess my differing opinion is I agree. You're completely right. It's a tax.
Mhm.
Let's be honest about what it is. I before I got into the ministry, I worked in real estate. Again, a lot of taxes are so when you go to a closing table, when you buy a property and you go to the closing table, the day of closing is the day that all of the fees associated with that property changing hands are calculated.
Yep.
So when you close today, and today is the 19th of November, then the owner, the seller, let's put it in terms that most folks will understand, the seller of that property pays the HOA dues if there are any, and the taxes up to today.
Mhm.
They prorate those and they pay those taxes and those HOA dues or any other kind of fees like that up to the day they owned the property, which is the 19th of November. The the new owner, aka the buyer, picks up the bill for all of that starting tomorrow. Or some again, depending on the
Mhm.
closing. Some attorneys may even do it starting today, right? Because you bought the property today. Either way, you prorate those out and you kind of share those expenses. When I worked in the restaurant industry, which I worked in for a long time before I got into real estate, again, the restaurant industry is probably the industry that may be known best for this. Um, and so if you didn't know this, I'll give you a little insight to, and I don't mean Cody. Cody's a brilliant guy, but some in the audience might not know this. Um, if you didn't know that when your prices go up at your favorite restaurant, again, whether that's McDonald's or mom and pop's diner down the street, 90% of the time, if not 100, almost 100% of the time, the reason their menu prices went up is tied to fuel,
Yep.
because everything that comes in for them to cook for you comes in on a truck.
Yep.
And so when fuel costs go up, the cost of groceries skyrocket.
Mhm.
And when the cost of groceries skyrocket, restaurateurs cannot absorb those costs. Now, sometimes I'm being a little bit hyperbolic. Sometimes it's wages and because those are your two big factors in a restaurant is labor and food. That's it. That's what you're paying for at a restaurant. You pay for labor and you pay for the food. So most of the time when you see a menu price go up, it's because fuel costs have went chaotic, and so they have to um, raise their prices so that they don't have to absorb the cost of food going up. So, I mean, you've done this. We've all been doing this our whole lives.
Mhm.
You've been paying the absorption cost of somebody else's cost of doing business. So my friend's side, who loves you as a friend, says, "Man, it sucks that you paid 4 grand in extra taxation that you weren't planning for, and that does bite into your micro economy,
Mhm.
both for your family, the Fields family, but also for your business, Westminster Effects."
Yep.
But also as just a guy that understands economics and as your friend, I would say, and pass that price along. The thing that you would tell me, perhaps, and a lot of business owners do tell us, is I can't. I don't have margins for that.
Mhm.
You know, my product sells at X, to pay that extra $4,000 spread out over, again, my particular business model would be an a increase in price of this amount, and I don't have the margins for that. So sure, I can raise prices some.
Mhm,
I cannot raise them commensurate to what it's costing me. So while I'm not eating the entire 4 grand in your case, I'm
mhm.
say I'm eating, 2,500 of the 4 grand or whatever, again, it equates for you.
Yep.
There is a real cost to me. I can't absorb, I have to absorb some of it because I can't pass it all along. No one would buy my products at that elevated of a cost. And that's true. That is real. That
Yep.
does happen.
Yeah,
Um,
one of the good things with in my case is I had already bumped up my prices for pretty much all of my models across the board because of additional bells and whistles that I've added uh, to dang near everything that I build. Uh, if anybody's familiar with MIDI and MIDI based
mhm,
bypass and stuff like that, I've added that to almost everything that I build, and so that's a significant feature. And so most of my models went up about $20, which we went in the boutique pedal world. I went from 150 to $170 retail, which is not that bad for a small brand. Most of what you see in this world is going to be about $200 per pedal, and I'm trying to beat that.
yeah.
So I've already factored that in, and so it's like, well, do I bump prices up again now that these things have arbitrarily been decided? Um, One interesting thing, and regardless of how things were funded, I think for one, having the first 100+ years of our nation founded by tariffs, that's one argument. But there's also a recognition of the kind of economy that we have. We're an industrialized economy now, when it was an agrarian
Mhm.
economy then.
Agreed.
And so there are necessarily things in an industrial and now service-based economy. We're not even a
Mhm.
manufacturing-based economy, even though our manufacturing output from 40 years ago it's increased from that
Yeah.
because of robotics and stuff like that. And then you have to get into a discussion of, well, do you ban robotics so you can hire more people? Which I
Or
don't know
now
that
what
it
will be AI? Yeah.
or what will be I don't think anybody actually wants to go there when you
Yeah.
really start to argue it. So Breitbart put out an article championing this 150-year study about how great tariffs were because they decrease inflation, all that kind of thing. What it actually said, when you really get down to it, is yes, inflation went down and stuff like that because one, supply went down, which meant you always have an initial spike in prices because the demand stays the same. But then demand goes down because nobody has the money to pay for those kinds of things. So both supply and demand go down. But then also with manufacturing and the inputs required for manufacturing, because there's no such thing as completely domestic manufacturing,
Yeah.
whether it's rare earths, whether it's steel, aluminum, or alpaca fur or
Yep.
wool or whatever. Whatever it is, something's going to be imported. And when you increase the prices on all of those, employment goes down because your manufacturing just got that much more expensive. And so what you actually end up with is a deflationary spiral with less employment, and people are actually worse off the more you import it, the more you tax imports, because what everything is really based off of, instead of nationality. And I know you're not arguing protectionism, you're just arguing taxation. You have to have a
Mhm.
revenue source somewhere
Yep.
for the government. And so what you actually end up with is people are worse off when nations rely on import taxation to prop themselves up.
Well, and then again, and this discussion could have been the entire hour or more.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
then there's the whole argument of using money as a weapon, which again, the Bible's not silent on. So there becomes a very robust and I think needed conversation about um, how America or any large superpower style country can weaponize and has and does
Hmm.
weaponize its monetary fund, and and it's just it's revenue in general, whether it's through tariff or whether it's through when we aren't happy with Russia, and we start slapping. Um, Sometimes we call them tariffs, and other times, what golly, what are we? I'm drawing a blank on the word, embargoes. We do trade embargoes, and
Mhm.
we do all of these various things, right? And we pat ourselves on the back, saying, "Well, we're not going to war. This is a much more diplomatic way of doing it." And in fairness, there is an argument to be had. Maybe it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Um, what I don't like is when the public either hasn't thought through some of these things, or one, they just don't even know they exist.
Yeah.
It's just kind of, again, it becomes so ubiquitous that it's kind of, well, this is just part of the warp and woof of the air that we breathe. Um, this is what America does. Well, yes, but is it what America should be doing?
Right.
If we're going to call ourselves a decent country, a good country, a moral country, God willing, you and I both being of the thoughts and the post millennial leanings that we are, a
Mhm.
Christian country,
Yeah.
um, are these practices that we should be involved in? And I think those are ethical conversations that not only, should happen, they need to happen, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that there's a larger and much broader conversation than the economic one. But you're not wrong. I'm strictly arguing from an economic standpoint. Taxation has to exist. It will exist. Christ even says so.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I am much more a fan of a consumption-based tax than I am some of the less across the board taxes that we currently have in this country, like
Mhm.
property tax, where okay, so I've worked hard, I've bought property, and now I'm being taxed as a property owner, which means I don't really own my property. The government owns my property. I'm renting my property, because if I stop paying my
Yep.
property taxes, you are going to take my property from me,
Yep.
which means I don't actually own it.
Yep.
So I mean, again, that's not a biblical taxation in the slightest. It's a very unbiblical taxation,
Absolutely.
and it's an unfair taxation because tons of people don't own property.
Yep.
So and I'll use myself as an example. My wife and I own property, which a large portion of our property taxes, of course, go to local municipal things, one of which is schools. Well, actually, a large portion of which is schools.
That's probably the biggest thing.
That is the biggest thing. Some of it is to like fire and police, and by goodness, those should be paid for. And I'm happy paying my part of fire and police and emergency services and all that. That's great. But a large portion of my annual property tax bill goes to public schools, which my children will never go to.
Yep.
So not only are you insulting me by taking property taxes, but you're further insulting me by using said taxes to pay for a service that I don't want and will never use,
Yep.
to make sure that people's kids can go to school for free who don't own property. So
Yeah.
so folks that aren't even paying into the system will get to use this free service that I provide, who is
Yeah.
not using.
Right.
So no, there are ethical and even economic things in that example that just bother me to the nth degree. So economically, strictly economically, I'm a consumption tax guy all the way. Um, if you want to buy a product and it's an inflated price because of whether it's tariff or some other kind of taxation, if you want your state to have a 15% sales tax, but you don't charge any federal or state level income taxes, but you have a 15% sales tax on everything, I am of the opinion, gladly. What Give me the first state that's going to implement that, I'm moving there. So whatever state implements a consumption-based taxation, no property taxes, no income, whether federal or state, none of this other bull crap, these other taxes that you're just nibbling away at my income.
Yeah.
Nope, be upfront about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
raise it to 20%,
Uh,
25%,
oh,
fine.
no. No. I would stay lower, First Samuel 8 and such, where it's
Again, that's a different argument, and I
right.
agree,
Right.
that's an argument that should be had. But
Right.
just purely economics, I would rather pay a 25% sales tax, because right now I'm paying between 50 and 60% of my income to taxation.
Right. Right. And so it's refreshing to have this conversation with someone who is not simply saying, "Well, we have to protect American industry." You're simply arguing on a principle of taxation,
That's it.
which is refreshing. I still disagree, but it's a lot more fun, and honestly, it's more challenging to have that conversation than it is the protectionist argument, because ultimately the protectionist argument is really just a command economy from the right side,
Yeah.
which Marxism is still Marxism. It's still
Any way you
it's
cut it.
and if you're saying, you have to employ Americans because you're an American company, or you can only work with Americans because you're an American company, that is identity politics.
Yeah.
That is just a right wing DEI. And I know we've developed this allergy against the term woke right, and in a lot of ways that allergy is correct. That knee jerk reaction against the term is correct, but it actually does fit in this case because it is that thing. It's
Yep.
the inclusion of, or the equity of, Americans in the workforce taking precedent over the free market and the private individual doing what's best for him, his family, his business, regardless of who is employed or not. Because as a small business, I don't owe you a job. Right? That it's the same argument as people arguing that healthcare is a right. No, it's not. It's a good and a service. Same thing for employment. So I don't owe anybody a job, and if I do, I'm going to find the absolute best person to fill that role within my budget.
At
And whether
at a wage that you both agree upon. So
exactly, it's all
I'm not for
negotiated.
minimum wage. I'm not yet.
Yeah,
No, I'm
yeah,
again strictly as an economy guy. That I think all that's bogus. So I
yeah,
mean, if I can find a guy that's here that's willing to do the job for this amount of money, forget minimum wage,
yep,
then he's agreed to a wage that he's comfortable with and
yep.
that I'm comfortable with.
And,
That's
and
how
the
business happens.
and this is more fun anyway when we agree more than we disagree.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Uh,
it's like, oh yeah, we agree on this. Okay, now this thing. What about this thing? Now, can I
which
make
knowing you, I figured that there would be more things that we actually went, "Oh, I didn't see I thought you were looking at this a totally different way." Okay.
right?
No,
Because
we
we
actually
haven't
agree more.
discussed,
Yeah.
because we haven't discussed this before,
That's right.
and
That's
so
right.
that's where we actually let each other define our terms and stuff like that, and that's more fun. Can I make a quick biblical case against it?
Please.
That's a little bit of a
Please.
curveball. So First Kings 5, Solomon is gathering materials for the temple. And he says, "Now therefore command that they cut for me cedars from Lebanon, and my servants will be with your servants, and I will give you wages for your servants. I'm going to pay you for your work." And then he goes, "For you know that there's no one among us who knows how to cut timber like the Sidonians." He's like, "I'm going to hire foreign labor and import foreign materials because it's awesome,
Yeah.
because they do a better job." Verse 7, when Hiram heard the words of Solomon, he formed a picket line and said, "No, you can't do that. Israel only." No, he's when Hiram heard the words of Solomon, he rejoiced greatly and said, "Blessed be the Lord today, who has given to David a wise son over this great people." So
Yep.
Solomon says, "I'm going to import foreign labor that's really, really good at this. I'm going to import foreign inputs for this this construction project rather." And everybody says, "Man, that's what a great idea. Let's get the best and brightest that anyone has to offer and put it to use directly for the glory of God and the furtherance of the kingdom."
We call this meritocracy.
Yes.
So this is meritocracy.
Mhm.
And it works across the board.
It
The
always
best
works.
students should go to Harvard,
Yep.
or fill in the blank, whatever school. I
Right.
mean, they shouldn't have some DEI quota, or whether it's based on modern DEI, like sexual preference, or I think I'm a furry, turtle that is you
Why
know
is it that the furries keep coming up in the news recently? Like, what gives?
because we are depraved.
Yeah.
Um, but it shouldn't be the one that predated all the weird stuff now, which is you're black. I mean, I'm sorry that
Yeah.
that's not that doesn't work either. It is a merit based system.
Yep.
Whatever your skin tone, your sexual preference, your sexual identity, who cares?
Yep.
Can you get into Harvard? That's all I
Yeah.
care about. You know,
Yep.
are you the type of person, if I run a business, that I want to hire? I mean, you and I both run podcasts and you run a small business.
Mhm.
If people like this podcast, they tune in and they listen.
If they don't,
And if they don't, they don't.
they don't.
You
And
know,
same thing with me. I contract out my circuit board design work because I'm not good at it. And I'm a firm believer in paying people to do what they do well.
yeah,
And so I have tried the Fiverr route and it has not gone well. So the random guy from Pakistan
yeah,
didn't do a good job. And so there's a couple of Americans that I work with, and they do it. Man, what they do is just wizardry
yeah,
in terms of keeping the signal chain intact and making it sure everything has a low noise floor and stuff like that. Fantastic job. But when I order those circuit boards and have them partially manufactured because everything is surface mount these days, which is another discussion altogether. But uh, I get those from China. And even when the tariffs were at their highest, it was still significantly less expensive than getting those circuit boards manufactured stateside. And they're just as good, if not better.
yeah.
And so I'm gonna go where it's cost efficient and where the quality is, right? Like again, basic economics.
Yep.
So and so it's all about whether that cost is arbitrarily inflated or not. And a lot of this argument too is again over whether one guy has the authority to do that. And so this is where it's being civically minded.
Mhm.
I have printed out receipts from the tariffs and hand delivered them to my congressman's office, which is about 5 minutes away. And I've done that twice. With
How's response on that going?
his receptionist has been very nice about it and said, "Yeah, I'll give these to him." I don't know if they actually made it to him, but handed off
You're
a
still
business
awaiting your
card.
check?
Yeah, once, and I'm convinced the Supreme Court is going to overturn these because we have a bunch of textualists on the court. For one, we have, well, at least generally textualists on the court, we'll put it that way. And then we have three liberals who hate Trump.
Yeah.
So, so they're going to hate anything that he does anyway. And then the textualists are going to look at the law and say, this doesn't give you that authority. You don't you don't get to do this. So I'm going to get my money back with interest is the law. So we'll see what happens.
I'll be crossing my fingers for you, buddy.
I appreciate it.
The, but you're not wrong. All of this really has to be looked at from so many different levels. And just because you brought up the biblical side of it, and that's a big portion of what I try to do here, is I
Yep.
never want to have a conversation on my channel that doesn't somehow look at a theological framework that as Christians we should be thinking about. So you brought up something that Solomon is commended for,
Right.
a good practice there of outsourcing material and labor. Let me counterbalance that with something he also did while building the temple that
Sure.
was a horrible practice. He enslaves his own people. He
Yeah.
enslaves his own people to build, to literally, I mean, he basically becomes Pharaoh to his own Jewish labor force to build the temple,
And that's just a
and
few verses later.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a few verses later. It's so egregious, and I think this is biblically supported. Everyone wants to say it's because of his lifestyle choices that, again, he recaps in Ecclesiastes, as we already talked about in this episode, why God rends the kingdom from him. I don't think so. I think the scriptural support is there that God rends the kingdom from Solomon because he enslaves his people.
Yeah.
Slavery is so awful, and it's so endemic to who the Israelites were. It's such an egregious affront to God. Man stealing in general. They're again, anyone that tells me, well, the Bible supports, slavery. You sure about that?
You
You
sure
know,
about that?
you
Yeah.
sure about that? Again, let's have a real discussion about that. Man stealing was a capital offense even in the Old Testament, but I would argue, I think the kingdom is taken from Solomon's son, Rehoboam, um, because of that man stealing, and because Rehoboam doubles down on it. You see that in First Kings chapter 12. The people approach Rehoboam and say, "Are you going to lighten the burden that your father placed upon us?" And he goes, "Lighten it? Are you kidding?
Yeah.
I'm going to double down on it." And I mean, so no, it's um, in the same, because human beings are complicated. We're sinful. So
Mhm.
here you have an example of Solomon doing something very wise and very commendable, while at the same time making a horrible economic decision, and moral decision at the same time, and
Mhm.
doing what is evil in the sight of the Lord to do something that is good, which is to build the temple. You know,
Right.
so
Right.
so building the temple is good. That is supposed to be done. God commends it, and tells David, "Hey, you're not the guy for it, but your son's going to get to do it." So it's a good thing to do. He uses both good and bad practices to do it. So I mean, I only say all of that to say there are so many multifaceted things that need to be looked at when you're talking something as complex as globo economic, policy. It factors in so much, multinational, international politics, multinational and international economics. Again, ethics and morals. We all of these things must be looked at if a people and a nation is to be what God wants us to be,
Yeah.
which is why, and I'll kind of wrap this segment of our interview, and we've been going so long, it's probably good to wrap up the episode with this, um, which I've enjoyed, man. I could talk to you all day. Um,
Absolutely.
which is why it's imperative that if someone's going to wield power, if someone is going to run a nation and all nations, then it must be Christians. Not that we get everything right. We get
Yep.
lots of things wrong,
Yep.
but we at least have a biblical, transcendent, objective framework with which to operate. The lost, the pagan nations, they have nothing. They have the wisdom of man, which is no wisdom at all.
Yep.
And so it is imperative that all nations kiss the son lest he be angry. It we have to honor God with our lives. That's both on a micro and a macro level, both personally and corporately. And so it is, I mean, whether we're talking Skillet's music, which should and is God honoring, I'll go,
Mhm.
that's Here I Stand, I Can Do No Other.
Yeah.
Their music is God honoring, including O Come Emmanuel. Or it's economic policy like tariffs, or a guitar pedal company,
Yep.
or it's podcasting like what you and I do, or it's serving the Lord from in our homes as husbands, and for me a father, or in our churches as deacons and elders. It is imperative that we glorify God and enjoy him forever.
Yes.
You took the name of your company from, I think, the one of the greatest human documents ever written. Certainly scripture stands in a class all unto itself, but I mean, the Westminster Confession of Faith, I think, is one of the greatest human documents ever written.
And I don't disagree. I do think there were some improvements made.
Again, you sure about that?
Yeah, you sure
You
about that?
sure about that?
Well, this is why my church's confession is technically a blend of the 1689 and the Westminster, because I do think the 1689 overreacted in some places. But,
Like polity.
but, uh, I did name it Westminster Effects, yes, as a hat tip to our forefathers in the faith, but also because Westminster Effects sounds infinitely cooler than Second London Baptist Effects.
Yeah, it does, in fairness. It it
So
it rolls off the tongue a lot easier.
that's where the shout out of the 1689 overdrive comes from. So
Well, God bless you, brother.
you
I am a
too.
huge fan of kind of all that you're doing. I thank you
And
for your faithfulness in all the various facets, that I've kind of, at first from afar and now increasingly as your friend, been able to watch, and thank you. Thank you for your faithfulness to the Lord, and the sobriety and seriousness that you place upon all that you do. I say that, my audience, because again, I've gotten to know him to a degree that I know the involvement he has in leadership at his church. He's shared some of that with me. Um,
Mhm.
his music, his company, his personal life, because we're friends, so I get to see him on a, talk to him on a very personal basis. And this is a faithful brother in the Lord. And so I commend all that he does, his music. Go be blessed by his music. Go be blessed by, if you're a musician or you've got a musician in your life, Christmas is right around the corner. Go buy a boutique guitar pedal from my friend Cody from
Please do.
Westminster Effects. Um, he'll try to absorb some of these terrible tariffs for you. Um, and if you're in the greater Greer area on a Sunday, go visit them. I've also spoken with his pastor on occasion, and a super great guy and man of God as well. Go worship with them at Redeemer Church. If it no,
Resurrection.
Resurrection. I thought Redeemer's not right. Resurrection Church. Go worship with them at Resurrection Church if you're in the Greer area. And Cody, man, thank you for being part of the part of the show today. I've enjoyed this immensely.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks for being my friend for the last year plus. It's been great getting to know you and see what you're up to as well.
Well, thank you, my friend. So until next time, I'm your host, Corey Wing. And remember, be brave, be bold, and be civically minded. God bless, my friends.